Good evening, America. Welcome to your Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you as always from Washington, D.C. Within the last 24 hours, you have heard all about the failed House vote to impeach Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and the ongoing chaos at our southern border. And while we'll get into both of those issues with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton near the top of the hour, there are new revelations coming out of the Oversight Committee that implicate the Biden family as members of the U.S. House continue their impeachment inquiry. A newly released transcript obtained by Just the News with a representative of AmeriCorps, the now bankrupt healthcare company that loaned James Biden hundreds of thousands of dollars before it went under, shows that James Biden more than likely didn't render any consulting or marketing services and was paid for that he was paid for. Carol Fox told the Oversight Committee that she sued James Biden in 2022 because of his failure to repay the $600,000 in loans, and she couldn't nail down his title, what work he accomplished, why he was called a principal on the business card, and whether there was really loan documents to back up that loan and all the money that he got going back to 2018. We're going to have more on this and what's to come with Tony Bobulinski, the next big star witness to testify next week, with Oversight Committee member Andy Biggs in just a few seconds. But first, as we always do at this point in the show, I want to turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. She joins me for a flyover of the other headlines where she's in Los Angeles. Amanda, what's going on?
Good evening, John. After yesterday's news cycle, today feels not quite nearly as hectic, so that's good. All right, here's a brief rundown so that we don't have to keep Congressman Biggs waiting. The FAA is increasing oversight of Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets following the near-disaster Alaska Airlines door jam incident. The administration's oversight of Boeing's production lines and suppliers is expected to take about 6 weeks. Meanwhile, just hours ago, the bipartisan border bill that tied foreign aid to our southern border security failed to advance in the U.S. Senate. So Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is now expected to go with Plan B, which is voting on more than $90 billion with foreign aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza. So we're going to be monitoring that news over the course of the next hour. But speaking of Israel, last night the U.S. House failed to pass their bill to supply aid to the nation. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Hamas's ceasefire proposal, which included the release of 1,500 Palestinians, including 500 serving life sentences in exchange for about 130 men, women, and children kidnapped by the terrorist group on October 7th of last year. The Prime Minister expressed confidence that Israel's operation in Gaza will be over in months, and it's widely believed that not all of the hostages, unfortunately, will still be alive. So, John, there are so many more headlines that everyone can read over on justthenews.com, but I'm going to throw it back to you so we can get to the Congressman.
Yeah, Amanda, we're going to be keeping an eye on what happens in the Senate tonight. So we'll stay tuned to Just the News, and Real America's Voice will have you covered all through the night. And of course, Tony Bobulinski testifying next week is a big moment. He was at the center of the FBI's early inquiry into the Biden family back in 2020. For the first time, Congress is going to hear from him in official capacity. And we have the perfect first guest to tell us what to expect. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee, one of the most important voices when it comes to our southern border. And quite frankly, for any common sense in Washington, he is Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, good to have you back on the show, sir.
Oh, both of you are too kind to me. It's good to be with you.
We love having you on. Our audience loves having you on because we get the straight talk. And I want to start with the new impeachment information we learned this morning. This basically bankruptcy representative for AmeriCorps basically says, I don't know of any paperwork that shows that James Biden did anything for the money. There's not even paperwork for the loan. I can't even tell you why he had the title he had. Does this look like one of those no-show jobs?
It sure does. And thank you guys for breaking that story. This is something that we were onto for a while in our committee. And the interesting thing is James Biden, the Biden whole family enterprise, not one of them can come up with any documentation to show, certainly with regards to AmeriCorps, that James Biden did any work for them. Other than this murky thing of consultant, but nobody really there's nothing in documentation to show when he did it, how he consulted, what he had to say. And there certainly is no evidence of loans given to him or documentation of loans, because remember, the reason that that's critical is because he's getting money from Hunter Biden Enterprises, 200,000 here, 40,000 there. And it says in the memo, loan repayment. For what? For what? And so it's a congeries of crazy, an attempt to actually launder money, hide money. And the thing with AmeriCorps is pretty stinky because that ends up going bankrupt, and nobody can tell us what he did.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary.
Right. Well, and outside of what your committee has learned and brought to light, I don't think anyone's really even heard of AmeriCorps anyway. But with respect to Lion Hall, that consulting firm of James Biden's, the one for which Ms. Fox can't seem to locate any actual services rendered, have you noticed anything or have you found anything with respect to Lion Hall that it was a substantial business?
No, we really haven't, which is interesting because at the same time that's going on, don't forget he's creating and constructing federal housing in foreign countries and receiving lots of money there. But nothing indicates that this business was actually a real business. I mean, let's just face it. What is the product he was selling?
Yeah. That's a great question. And we may never get an answer because maybe there was no product. We'll have to wait and see. Congressman, I want to ask a little bit about the money trail to President Biden. You found some examples. Have any of the recent witnesses given you any other insight as to where money could have come in from all these LLCs and somehow get to the benefit of Joe Biden? Do you have any other leads beyond the good ones that you've already put out to the American public?
What's happened with the latest ones, let's take, for instance, Kevin Morris, the connoisseur of art that gave $7 million to Hunter Biden, and then later, after he was giving him this money, decided to get a promissory note because he thought that was required under the California Attorney's Ethics. There is nothing. They did a pretty good job. I mean, it's just like the CEO of Burisma said, I've hidden this money so much nobody will ever be able to, it'll take them 10 years to figure out I was even tied to Joe Biden, that type of thing. They've done a pretty good job, but when they come in to testify, their memory gets a little hazy on things, and they don't recall or they don't answer, and they kind of deflect us away. But be sure to understand that any benefit to Hunter Biden also inured to the benefit of Joe Biden. Why is that important? Because Hunter Biden himself said in his book and elsewhere, he was providing resources to his father.
Yeah, that's right. He did. Man, if you could just, I want to follow one thing. Is there enough evidence now that the committee should subpoena the president's own bank and financial records? Do you have enough cause to do that now?
Oh, I think so. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but I think you do, and I think you have to get to the bottom of it, and that's where you're going to find it. I used to think that he was clever enough to have this in some kind of a foreign overseas account would be very difficult for us to get. I'm not so sure about buy that anymore.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I know that you've got some big testimonies coming up, closed-door testimonies, of course, from Tony Bobulinski, James Biden, and Hunter Biden. And I would also imagine that the information you glean from each testimony, you're going to use that to build on with each subsequent testimony and questioning. But I wanted to ask you about Tony Bobulinski specifically, because I think he's probably going to have some pretty substantial information to share with you about the genesis of the relationship with CEFC. And you now, I think, have two witnesses now, Rob Walker and Tony Bobulinski, who have attested to the fact that, in fact, there was some communication with Joe Biden while he was still in office. Do you think that they were possibly stupid enough to record any of the details of that meeting? And if not, how much more juice do you think you can squeeze from the Tony Bobulinski lemon regarding the meeting that took place while Joe Biden was in office?
I'm not sure there was a recording, but I don't like to call Tony Bobulinski a lemon because I think he's more like the fruit of a very ripe tree because he has a lot of information to give. And I think he's going to, in my review of all the things that he has said, there is some stuff that is pretty obviously damning. And it's actually been substantiated by everybody from Devin Archer, Rob Walker. All these guys have substantiated what Tony Bobulinski said. He wasn't the only one. Also, the whistleblowers also substantiated what Bobulinski said. What I'm telling you is he has got more information to give. I think he's going to give it, and I think it's one that you can rely on. It'll be information you can rely on, because his track record has proven to be unshakable with other witnesses and other substantiating evidence.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. You look at the statements he's made in public, they've all been substantiated. Sir, I want to turn to another project that you've been involved with. You joined several lawmakers yesterday to argue for a resolution to declare that Congress to declare that President Trump didn't incite an insurrection. Tell us why that's important to you personally and why it would help the country.
Well, okay, on a personal level for me, to watch the political witch hunt that has gone on against President Trump is just outrageous to me. And it is political. And the second thing is what's gone on with the left-wing media using the term insurrection because they know it has a legal significance. They've bastardized that term. Even Christopher Wray, in an exchange with Eric Swalwell in the Judiciary Committee in 2021, said, well, I can't use that term. I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said, I can't use that term because I have to use a legal definition. And so they crafted a narrative. And I'll tell you the third thing is they've tried to rope everybody who was for a decertification, 141 plus members.
Right.
And we were doing the same thing Democrats had done. They used the process to try to decertify President Trump's election, et cetera. But now, because we moved to decertify, we are somehow insurrectionists. And they've used that in a very narrative building way. And so I look at it and I say, when you start trying to suppress people from being able to vote because you think Donald Trump's going to win, because I think that's really the motivation of this, that they're so scared he's going to win that you start actually filing lawsuits claiming he's an insurrectionist, and under the 14th Amendment he should be ineligible to be elected president. I tell you, you've gone over the line. It's one thing to call me an insurrectionist. I can take it. I've got thick skin. You can even call President Trump an insurrectionist. He's got thick skin. But it's quite another thing to try to use something that has absolutely no legal significance, no legal meaning whatsoever, and try to use that to prevent the Republican Party nominee, Donald Trump, from being able to be on the ballot. Then I say, shame on you, and it's time for us to really go after it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't seem to be acting like people who know they are going to win in November. Sir, I wanted to ask you about this letter that you and a number of your House colleagues, along with Senator J.D. Vance, sent to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, demanding answers regarding Ukraine, weapons packages. We obviously all know about the financial failings, overvaluing by the Pentagon of aid that was sent there. And I know that that's an important answer to get from him, but we keep hearing from John Kirby, Karine Jean-Pierre. We even hear from Joe Biden, although I can't really trust anything he says, considering he can't recall the name Hamas. What are the most important things that you need to hear from the Secretary of Defense? Because, unfortunately, he did have this surgery that took him out for a little while, but he's been back in the office, but he doesn't seem to be present the way that he should be.
Well, first of all, you can't believe anything that Karine Jean-Pierre says or what John Kirby says either. So nothing is being said that's the truth. The reason that we have to go to Secretary Austin is he's still got the title. I agree with you. He's been MIA, and we don't know really who's running that ship ever since he got back from his surgery or wherever he was. So I'm left with this. We have got to get to the bottom of where's our money being spent, where's the material going, and frankly, we've seen reports, everything from material turning up in Central Africa to money being laundered and embezzled by President Zelensky's henchmen. I don't mean to say henchmen, but his colleagues.
So we're gonna lose you, sir. I'm so sorry, because I want to keep that thread going, but we hit a hard commercial break. We're going to get back to you real soon. Folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, will join us back down to the border. A lot of big drama going on down there. We'll have all that.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's stay on that same topic, shall we? The true state of our southern border and the ongoing illegal immigration crisis, because heading into this November's general election, it's the #1 issue that is consistently polling ever since Iowa and even a few weeks before that. So tonight we have Texas State Attorney General Ken Paxton. He's been building a coalition of other attorneys general and filing nationwide lawsuits, which only helps to shape real solid policy and hold the Biden administration accountable. And lucky for us, the Attorney General has made time to join us to get the latest policy fights and southern border crisis information to all of you. So General Paxton joins us right now. Welcome back, sir. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Sir, if I could just get the latest update on the southern border with respect to Joe Biden's federal agents and then, of course, Texas folks who are trying to actually protect the border, National Guard, and then the trucker convoy. There was a trucker convoy that showed up this weekend. Can you just kind of give us an update on that?
So I can tell you this, we're continuing to do what we do, which is we're going to protect our border. We are still putting up fence, wire. The Supreme Court ruling that took down the injunction did not stop us from continuing to do that. And if the Border Patrol decides they're going to cut it down and let the cartels deliver people, we'll just put it right back up, because it's our obligation and our desire to protect the people of Texas, and that ends up protecting the entire country.
Yeah, it is true. This is more than just protecting Texas. This is about the whole country now, sir. On that measure, there was a lot of effort on Saturday and Sunday and Monday to convince us all that the Senate bipartisan border bill was going to protect the country. But after people read it, it seemed like it got a resounding thumbs down. I want to get your reaction. What the people of Texas thought about what Mitch McConnell, James Lankford, and others tried to impose on the country.
Well, we thought it was horrible. We put together a letter that 16 other Republican AGs signed, saying don't vote for this bill. There was nothing good in it. All it did was rubber stamp what Joe Biden's been doing for the last 3.5 years, all the bad stuff, and none of the good stuff. And so the Republicans would have been basically signing on to his failed policies of letting the border be overrun. And then it would have put Texas in a really horrible position, because instead of suing in Texas courts, in the Fifth Circuit, they would have forced us to go to D.C. for all of our lawsuits, it's a much more liberal court. So I don't know why the Republicans would ever promote this border insecurity and this, the policies of Joe Biden. All they were really doing was bailing him out.
Yeah.
Well, and sir, I think something that seems incredulous to a lot of Americans is the fact that the Border Patrol Council actually backed this bill. I know that it provides additional agents for them, but honestly, the situation we're dealing with across America with law enforcement, whether it's the border or police departments, people don't want those jobs anyway. So why do you think they really supported it?
You know, I don't get it. Brandon Jones is usually pretty solid and has been, I've pretty much been in agreement with on border issues. It doesn't make any sense to me, because it certainly doesn't make the border better. I know that some Republican senators were saying, well, this, makes it better. And I've heard even some Republican Congress say it makes it better. But it was going to give Mayorkas the ability to do asylum without going through a court system. It was going to basically put in statute, codify this $5,000 a day and give flexibility to do more if they needed to. I don't see any upside. It's all bad, all really bad, not just a little bad, really bad.
Yeah, I think that American people figured that out quicker than maybe the Senate Republicans did. So I want to ask a little bit about the impact of yesterday. So the Mayorkas impeachment articles fail, maybe because there just wasn't a proper head count. Then there is the failure of the Senate bill imploding 48 hours after they do it. You're on the front lines. What do you want to tell Congress that your state, your people, your constituents need right now? What can Congress do tomorrow to pick up the scraps of yesterday's disaster and do something to help your constituents?
Maybe discount votes on Mayorkas. I think we need to send a message. This guy has done everything he could to help the cartels transport people into our country and open the borders for, importation of drugs, potentially terrorists. And so if anybody ever deserved to be impeached, it's Mayorkas. Hopefully the Speaker can go back and work out the vote count and make sure that the message is sent. I know in the end, Joe Biden has these same policies, but at the very least, Congress needs to send a message, hey, what you're doing to this country is horrifically bad, and we're going to make Mayorkas go away, and you're going to have to do better.
Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to ask you about a couple instances recently that I think are really scaring a lot of Americans, if I can put it bluntly. You had the situation in New York City where the New York City police officers were beat by a number of illegal immigrants. You had the man on Long Island whose Israeli flag was torn down, and the same situation with the illegal immigrants who perpetrated those crimes. They flipped the bird to cameras. On the case in Long Island, he was flipping the bird to the man's security camera. These are instances, I think, that scare the American people. What does it take for Democrats, especially Joe Biden, being on the possible chopping block in November? What does it take for them to realize that this is not a winning issue for people who used to be their voters?
Well, look, I think that's part of the reason they want to pass this bill. They want to put it on the Republicans and say, look, this was not just me doing this for 3.5 years. The Republicans signed on to all this stuff, so it must be that it's they're in agreement with what we're doing. That's why I think this is such a stupid bill, because it hurts Republicans. It makes them sign on for the failed immigration policies that the Biden administration has pushed. All I really want them to do is go back to what Trump would do, enforce the law. If Congress would just find a way to fund the enforcement of federal law just the way Trump did, we know that works. Why not go back and do what works? But the reality is Joe Biden wants what he's getting. He wants people coming to this country because he's looking at votes down the road. He's looking at census numbers, and he's trying to create a one-party system in this country.
Sir, I want to talk about the support that other states have rallied around Texas. You mentioned the 16 attorney generals in the letter yesterday, 13 governors with Governor Abbott on Sunday at Eagle Pass. It's an extraordinary alliance that so many governors and attorney generals who have their own issues in their own states are right alongside of Texas. How important is that, and how can that be used to mobilize, maybe to put pressure on Congress?
Look, I think that's extremely important, because if it's just Texas or just Arizona, just border states, that's not enough. But now with immigration, illegal immigration, drugs, crime, potential terrorism, all affecting states across the country, I think it helps send a message to Congress and to other leaders that, hey, we're not putting up with this anymore. This is negatively affecting our families. It's negatively affecting the people of this country, and it's not just border states. I think that's really helpful in moving this in another direction towards protecting our border instead of allowing massive illegal immigration.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and sir, I just want to reiterate what John said, because you really have led the charge on a number of these multi-state efforts with attorneys general in holding the Biden administration accountable. And I wanted to ask you about that with respect to the D.C. Appeals Court ruling that President Trump, in fact, does not enjoy presidential immunity. Now, if that goes to the Supreme Court and they decide on it, I think that will be reversed. But doesn't that open up Joe Biden to future legal issues? You got 13 dead in Afghanistan, 3 dead in Jordan, countless Border Patrol agents and private citizens in the United States killed because of the open border. Isn't that a little bit tricky for Biden?
It sure is, but here's the deal. The courts have become so political. They're not about rule of law, and I'm dealing with this in my own state. If you go into certain courts, liberal courts, they don't follow the law anymore. So they look at the result they want. If it's Joe Biden, he had documents in his garage that no one went after him. The FBI didn't bother to touch that. They didn't bother to indict him. What did they do? They indicted the President Trump. So when the same exact behavior occurs, they treat different people different, which is a real problem. If the rule of law goes away, which it is going away in this country, then there's no respect to the courts. There's no credibility with the courts. That is a different country than the founders set up, and we've got real problems.
Yeah, and we are at an existential moment. Sir, I want to turn to one other thing. We had a story on our site the other day saying that there's been a rash of new studies calling for, these are scientists, peer-reviewed, calling for a pause in the mRNA vaccines. You have, I think, one of the landmark lawsuits against the drug makers and the COVID vaccine. Can you bring us up to speed on what you're learning from that litigation?
Yeah, so what we're learning is that the pharmaceutical companies, including Pfizer, lied about the effectiveness and the ability to stop transmission of COVID. They claimed that it was 95% effective. They never tested it because Congress gave them immunity from liability, so they have no incentive to test it. So they tested it for a couple of days, but they didn't really know, and they went and tested it live with us. And then when they started realizing that the results were not 95%, they were less than 10%, maybe as low as 1%, they started censoring people and started punishing people for speaking out. Of course, we know the federal government punished people, And so it became just sort of a media effort, a government effort, despite the facts, to force people to take this vaccine that in the end had side effects and didn't stop the transmission of COVID.
Yeah.
Unreal.
It's unbelievable. And I still see billboards and commercials encouraging people to get the vaccines. It strains credulity, to be honest. Attorney General, thank you so much for being here. It seems like every time I pick up my phone and check out the news, you are taking some action, and it's been incredible to see. We appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me on. We're going to keep fighting.
I know for sure.
We know you will because we've seen it. All right, we're off to a commercial break, but we're going to be back on the other side to continue this very conversation with former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. He has a podcast that you all should check out. It's definitely one of mine and John's favorites, but he's great to talk about nearly anything, but we definitely have got to pin him down on the debacle that happened yesterday in the U.S. House regarding impeaching Secretary.
Welcome back, America. When he was on Capitol Hill, he was one of my favorite people to interview because you always got it straight. You didn't get the fluff. You didn't get the spin. You got the facts. Now he's got, I think, one of the most important podcasts in the country. And I'm certain he's going to give us the real call today on what happened on Capitol Hill. Joining us right now, former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. Congressman, good to have you on, sir.
Hey, y'all are my favorite folks. I love being with y'all.
We have a blast every time we're together. I was sitting here at the end of the show right after the vote ended on the impeachment article saying, how could they not have the math right? And I'm just going to ask you that question because I haven't gotten a good answer all day. How could they not have the math right?
Math is hard, John.
That's a good
Look,
answer.
I always joke with people that I'm a lawyer, a pastor, a chaplain, and media. I didn't do math, but the one thing you've got to be able to do with math is understand politics, because politics is math, period. End of statement.
Yep.
And if you have 3 votes on a 5-member commission, you get what you want. If you don't, you lose. And this is the problem last night. There seems to be a little bit of frustration and hubris coming from the Speaker's office and also leadership offices here. They went ahead with a vote last night that they knew was razor thin. And to not assume the Democrats would hold somebody back or come back with that vote is frankly, they got what they unfortunately deserved in that one. But the one that bothered me the most was going ahead right after that and putting the Israeli vote up, knowing you don't have an agreement with Hakeem Jeffries. You don't have any kind of agreement because Hakeem is going to protect the Senate in this. And having 2 back-to-backs, it just is, again, it's just very frustrating. Look, we can all have differences if this is what they should be focusing on. Look, Mayorkas is bad, should have been gone a long time ago. But we've got another 3 weeks array in which we're not doing separate spending bills. We're looking at putting a whole package through. We don't have FISA. It's been pushed off till April, and nobody's talking about it. We have FAA reauthorization. We got literally planes with doors blowing off, and we're not talking about it. I'm really getting concerned that there's not a unifying message coming out of the Republican caucus, and we've got a big election this year.
Yeah, that's very
Sure
important.
do. Sir, I wanted to ask you about I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to going from Speaker Kevin McCarthy to Speaker Mike Johnson. They both have their strengths. They both have their weaknesses. But with respect to, like you said, the math being apparently hard for Republicans, to be fair, it was also hard for Democrats because they ended up having more people on the chamber floor than anticipated. So I guess that's a plus for them when they did the math wrong. But do you think that this would have happened under Speaker McCarthy?
I would say it'd been a lot more tentative for McCarthy to bring it to the floor. McCarthy's a longtime player in leadership circles. He's been at that table. I mean, he was the whip for many, many, many years. I mean, it would have been closer. I'm not going to say he would have done different, but I think it would have been a lot more programmed out. Now, I will have to say something, though, man. This is where it really is becoming a focus for this math issue and how we actually get it to the floor. Remember, and I've said this many times before, Nancy Pelosi had the exact same margin in the previous Congress and passed things like infrastructure bill, Biden, the whole Bidenomics package, the COVID relief package, all of these things. And again, this goes to a fact that Democrats understand that they can do nothing. Even if they don't get everything they want, they cannot do anything unless they win the votes. Republicans, we're still out there fighting with each other over perfect sometimes. And we can't understand that we're not going to move conservative values forward unless we can actually agree to get the votes together. So I'm a little bit frustrated with members who won't vote for anything because it's not good enough. Well, at the end of the day, which are we dealing with? We're dealing with Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and everything else. Why? Because all Democrats agree with it? No, because they knew that if they passed it, it would get put into law. We as Republicans have got to realize what matters is not YouTube videos, it's policy that gets passed.
Yeah, that is such important advice, and it seems like it has been lost for the last several weeks, maybe last several months on the House side. It really is noticeable to all, those of us who've been here a long time. Sir, I want to ask, all right, there's a lot of pieces and shards on the floor right now, and someone's got to pick them up and start to create some path to not only getting the people's business done the rest of the year, because if you take the commitment of America versus the record of achievement, they're missing the main things they promised the American people. How do they pick up the shards? How do they go about and actually create a meaningful agenda that they can run on, but also just to make the country better? We're suffering from so many things.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. Look, I like Mike Johnson. Mike was a friend of mine. He was on my committee when I was ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. He's a smart guy. He's just been put in a position, frankly, of an ungovernable majority. And that's not to make up for excuses for things that they're pushing and some of the decisions have been made. But this is the thing that they've got to realize. If Republicans want to make an impact and influence decisions on spending and other things, they're going to have to come together. And also, Speaker Johnson is going to have to make some decisions. And there's been some incidences recently where he won't make a decision. The very essence of leadership is making a decision, following through on that decision, changing if need be, but making a decision. And right now, I've talked to many members in the that have said basically, because somebody asked, well, what about another move to vacate the chair? And I heard one member actually say, why would you do that? Nobody wants the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's obviously very important to have principles when you are in public office, but these purity tests are absolutely ridiculous. I think that's why in those special elections in Virginia, we lost those seats. So letting perfect get in the way of good seems like the theme of this Congress these days. I wanted to ask you about what happened yesterday in Nevada. I love your political mind and the way that you analyze these situations. Nikki Haley lost to none of these candidates. I know that she is likely going to stick it out through South Carolina, but do you think that this is another chink in the armor that might cause her to bow out after her home state?
Well, at one, you'd have to assume she has armor and to have a chink in the armor. There's just none there. This has been over for a while. I was giving some deference for a little while, just saying, okay, whatever. I think Trump is the nominee. I've said that since Iowa, even before Iowa, Trump was going to win this thing. But now it's become apparent that the Democratic donor base, the others that are funding her campaign, the Never Trump folks, she is content to simply attacking Donald Trump. She is simply content on tearing down Donald Trump. And this is what's going to happen. Her lines that she's using right now in a failed campaign are going to come back to bite congressional and Senate races in the fall, and also come back from the Biden campaign in the fall as well. At this point in time, look, for everybody who likes Nikki Haley, she has her qualities that you may want to vote for, but she's not going to win. And, this is just, when you get beat by nobody, that should tell you something. That these people are not going to vote for you. And now, so it's now turned for me that I believe that she likes what she's doing, undoubtedly. She enjoys attacking Donald Trump and attacking the Republican Party that has overwhelmingly voted for him. Yeah. And I think that's going to become a concern for many people. And it's one that I'm very frustrated in. If she wants to get embarrassed in South Carolina, it's just going to happen. And Super Tuesday, the numbers are actually worse.
Yeah, she's trending towards Liz Cheney relevancy. We'll see what happens with that. So I want to talk about, you've always been a keen mind when it comes to the judiciary and all the things that before the Judiciary Committee. The ruling from the D.C. Circuit on immunity seems to have far-reaching consequences for president's future. And you and I were talking off air about the idea of how, if it were to be applied past, Barack Obama and George W. Bush might be pretty uncomfortable, no?
They could be. I would encourage every American to start getting interested in the judicial system and read these opinions. You may not understand everything, but there's plenty of stuff out there. But I found two things, John and Amanda. We talked about this earlier. Two, there's an assumption, there's a dewy-eyed optimism by these three-judge panel in writing this, as if every institution in America works as if it was supposed to work. And what I mean by that is they're saying, well, this chilling effect that's spoken of by Donald Trump is not really happening because no other president has ever faced criminal actions after leaving. Well, they've never had the Department of Justice run by President Biden and Merrick Garland. They've never had this issue. And so for me, it's a little bit frustrating for them to not take into account the fact of this is a fresh encounter, and then to look at what their judge and their ruling may take into it. And I'm afraid the Supreme Court may fall into this same trap. There are things that need to be held accountable. I just believe right now they're making false assumptions about what Donald Trump did as part of his executive privilege or overseeing elections, and that needs to be discussed. But by this ruling, they're basically opening the door up for the Obama drone strikes, which killed Americans, the George Bush policy of detainees, and the torture memos that all came up. We may agree that those were fine, but somebody in the Department of Justice could say, you violated the color of the law here, and we're going to prosecute you now that you're out of the office.
Yeah, that is the warning sign. Real quick, we got about 10 seconds. Supreme Court, are they going to reverse it?
I don't know. This one's going to be a tough one. I do believe they reversed the Colorado. This one's going to be an interesting one. I hope they actually start it for hearings, or actually sell it for oral arguments in October, November, December next year.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate statement, wouldn't it now? Congressman, we love having you on. We love your podcast. Thanks for joining us. What a great conversation. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we've got senior economist for the American Institute for Economic.
Welcome back to your latest edition of Just the News, No Noise. We have been so caught up in the Mayorkas impeachment firestorm up on Capitol Hill that we haven't really even talked much about the upcoming Super Bowl. It's this Sunday. And before we dive into the economics of the main event and how the economics of today are negatively impacting event goers or football fans at this time of the year, I want everyone to take a quick look at the $2.5 million luxury suite that you can get at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas for this year's Super Bowl. And of course, while Wagyu beef hot dogs, surf and turf nachos, seafood stuffed potatoes, frozen cheesecake, and plenty of alcohol sound great to a lot of people, I have a feeling that prices for these food and drink items wouldn't be this high if it weren't for, of course, Bidenomics. And our next guest believes the same based on his latest article. Joining us now for this discussion is Dr. Peter Earle. He is the senior economist for the American Institute for Economic Research, and he joins us now to talk about the rising costs in Biden's economy. Dr. Earle, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, sir, I saw some really bizarre numbers in your piece, specifically the ticket prices that have absolutely exploded since just last year. Look, inflation under Joe Biden is not great. It's 17.3% cumulative right now. But I think that the price that you cited in this article was multiple times beyond that. Why is that?
Yeah, so I mean, I go back to Milton Friedman. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And, if we saw prices rising in 1, 2, or 3 goods, we'd be pretty sure that it was a relative price change. But when you see prices of everything rising, we know it's inflation. And so, as you said, prices to attend the Super Bowl this year have taken a turn towards the surreal. Tickets, the average tickets averaging in the neighborhood of $10,000, with some particularly choice seats changing hands over $100,000. Hotel rooms that usually go for $100 or $200 will be over $1,500. Airline tickets are up, ticket prices, and if you choose to drive, it's an 8-hour drive from San Francisco. I'm not sure from Kansas City, but in either of those cases, you're going to be paying $3.66 on average a gallon. So, however it happens, and particularly if you celebrate at home, prices are going to be much higher, not only than you're used to, but much higher than most of the statistics are telling us.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. When they said what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, I didn't know it meant my wallet, but apparently that's what it's going to mean this time. How about that?
All your money will stay there.
All your money's going to stay there. All right.
Right.
I want to pivot to the economy's impact on this election. This feels like a classic pocketbook election. There are clearly a lot of other issues, age of the president and the insecure border crime. But most people, even Democrats, if they're being honest at the dinner table, like, darn, this is a lot more expensive. Is this one of the more classic economic pocketbook elections of our lifetime?
I think for many people, certainly not me, but people, maybe a generation younger than me, this will be their first kitchen table election.
Yeah.
Where people are actually looking at prices and they're saying, yeah, it's true that BLS says that inflation's up between 3 to 4% over the last year, but we know that steaks are up 15%, that ground beef is up 8%, that sort of thing. I mean, prices are just skyrocketing. So I definitely think it's going to be a major issue. And the other thing is that the more you hear a political figure, whether it's someone in the White House or your congressman or whoever, telling you that what you see is not what's actually happening, you know that they're hiding things. And I think that that's going to be the pivotal issue. I mean, so much effort has gone from the political class into saying that, the inflation we see, either it doesn't exist or it's being caused by gas station owners or greed or whatever, that one shouldn't have to wonder after a trip to the supermarket what they're hiding. It's pretty clear. And I see that in the numbers every single day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, just the issue of inflation affects so much because Americans are spending more, so they're not saving more. They don't have enough money to pay their credit cards. Credit card debt is now up to $1.13 trillion in the United States. I wanted to ask you about that, though, because we've also seen a record number of Americans move into the delinquent category with respect to payment of credit card and loan payments. Is that because of luxury purchases? Is it because of day-to-day goods? Because I feel like those are the Americans who are going to be looking at this the most as a pocketbook collector.
Yeah, no, for the most part, people are taking on more credit just to keep up their standard of living. They're doing so they can, buy groceries, get a change of their tires, take the vacation they wanted to take. People aren't spending the money that they're taking on credit on luxury items. And the thing is, when people do that, when they take on credit for just regular consumption, what happens is they're trading prices of goods that have risen for an even worse price, which are interest rates, because interest rates, of course, are the price of borrowing money. And they recently hit records as well. So it's a very negative turn, especially as you mentioned, the delinquencies, the delayments, the 30 and 90-day payment delays are reaching a high for this cycle. So yeah, people are definitely, there's some desperation out there and some wallet fatigue. And it's hard to imagine how those people would ever vote or decide to continue the way things are going right now.
Yeah. It really is a real phenomenon for folks. I want to turn to something that I've never seen in all my years in Washington, and that is, I think most people assume economic indicators are free of politics, but there has been, I think, almost an entire year, 11 months worth of job reports that a month later, 6 weeks later, they go, oops, and they take the number of jobs created down long after Americans have heard the number. Have you ever seen something like that? What's behind this unusual phenomenon of a shrinking job total?
In 28 years, I've never seen 11 of 12 months where job numbers came out looking very strong and then they were revised downwards. And of course, the kicker there is that when you revise those things downward, they don't get the sort of media attention that the top line initial number gets. And that's the same thing with GDP and every other number that has 2 or 3 revisions afterwards. I'm going to stop short of calling it a complete scam or a fabrication, but I will say that the amount of discretion which goes into the first months of those numbers is probably not consistent with randomness. I would say that one would be well advised, anybody watching, to look at the first and the second and the third run of all those numbers and see how they change over time.
Yeah, that's a great.
Dr. Earl, we got about a minute left. Quickly before we go, the message we constantly hear from this administration regarding Bidenomics, whether it's Green Jean-Pierre from the press podium or Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, is just give it time, just wait. We promise the economy is going to get better. But if you were running for office for re-election in November, wouldn't you want to do something economically that would inject some prosperity into the economy so that you would win?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I would want to make sure that people know that it's not my office, but the Federal Reserve that controls monetary policy. But more importantly, I'd at least want to implement some pro-growth policies. I mean, higher taxes and redistribution to favored groups, whether it's Greens or whatever, that doesn't constitute real economic growth. That's just right. Redistribution. Those are not pro-growth policies.
Yeah,
right.
Good point.
No. And the American people are definitely feeling it. Dr. Earl, it was so great to have you here with us tonight. We're going to have you back on again very soon. Thank you for being here, sir. All right, everybody, we are going to take a very quick commercial break before our last segment. But before we turn you loose over to Grant Stinchfield, I want you to tune into this exclusive offer from our friends over at AMAC. President's Day is around the corner. They got a great deal.
Hey, folks, this President's Day, honor the legacy that shaped America with AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. At AMAC, they celebrate the courage and leadership that built our nation. In honor of our President's Day, enjoy their exclusive sale. Become a 5-year AMAC member, just like me, for just $35. That's right, $35 for a 5-year membership. As a member, enjoy benefits tailored for mature Americans, resources, exclusive discounts, trusted news, games, sweepstakes, and a powerful voice for your rights. Join us in honoring our nation's leaders. Visit amac.us/justnews for this special President's Day offer during the month of February. Seize the opportunity to be part of a community valuing experience, wisdom, and principles that make America strong. Head to amac.us/justnews and secure your 5-year membership for just $35 today. AMAC, better for you, better for America. Happy President's Day from the Association of Mature American Citizens. Go visit amac.us/justnews. Welcome back, America. About 5 minutes left before we get to hand things off to Grant Stinchfield. I'm going to turn right to Amanda. This was a really robust conversation we had today and all the different guests. But Doug Collins and the idea that you take that immunity ruling that just came out against Donald Trump and you apply it to Barack Obama or George W. Bush, it'd be pretty uncomfortable. I don't think I've heard anyone say that before, but that is really a provocative thought, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess send them all to jail because enjoying presidential immunity is kind of part of what allows a president to make decisions that they think are best for the country. But here's the thing. If you lift that presidential immunity and every president know that he's susceptible to go to prison for the rest of his life after office, maybe that's the way. Maybe that's the purity test. If you really want to be president, you just have to know that prison is waiting for you on the other side. Oh, boy. I mean, this is just such a debacle. And you're right. I mean, that opens up so much future litigation. But I certainly hope that the Supreme Court makes the reverse decision on this.
So.
John, you've been in journalism for a long time. There's a whole lot of hullabaloo online about Tucker Carlson going to Moscow and interviewing Vladimir Putin. Here I was thinking that was just journalism because you don't always agree with everything that the subject of your interview has to say. But, you know, it's the last block of the show. Let's give our audience some eye candy. Check out this meltdown on CNN over that.
A massive shakeup in Kyiv coming as Putin is trying to court the MAGA GOP in the United States. In fact, one of the leaders of the MAGA GOP is in Moscow tonight. It's the man you see here with the MAGA leader Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson. Possibly there in Moscow to interview Putin. Definitely there as a Putin-supporting celebrity.
MAGA leader. Ugh. Some of the terms they use and the coinciding pictures. It's not really journalism anymore. However, I do, John, think that Tucker Carlson is conducting journalism in this interview. But you've been a journalist your entire life. What are your thoughts?
Well, CNN ought to go back and look. In 2021, their own reporter interviewed
That's right.
Putin during a time when it was very controversial. And if you go all the way back to 2008, they interviewed him right after the incursion into the Republic of Georgia. You know, Putin was persona non grata, and I didn't hear CNN saying, oh, my God, we're terrible people. This is what we do. If a world leader takes action, we want to find out why did they do it. And it's no different than Dan Rather interviewing Saddam Hussein or Mike Wallace interviewing, I think he interviewed Putin at one point as well. I mean, so many people have done this in the past. I think it's laughable that CNN is not even looking in their own sock drawer. But I guess, well, that's CNN. That's why they're so struggling to have any ratings at all. It's just crazy.
So if them's the rules, if you are, as a journalist, are not supposed to sit across the table from a dictator like Vladimir Putin, then why did Gavin Newsom really just like, I mean, he pulled out all the stops. He did not hold anything back when Chairman Xi came to San Francisco or to Sacramento. So I don't know. I mean, you got to be consistent, but that's not really the case here. All right, John,
It's a folly of the leftist media. I mean, they have made a mockery of themselves, and shame on them. Listen, their ratings are justified by their performance. It's really what it's about.
Well, they've had to eat some serious crow when it comes to John Solomon's reporting. I do know that. Okay, John, final topic. I want to throw this over to you. Tulsi Gabbard implied that she would be open to a conversation about being the number 2 on the ticket with Donald Trump should he become the Republican nominee. What do you think that ticket would be like? They are both pretty alpha. I don't know how that works out.
Yeah, I don't know either. But listen, what does it tell you? It tells you that a lot of traditional Democrats realize that Donald Trump is more akin to their value system than the current leadership of the party. And, you know, Tulsi Gabbard was a rising star. She ran for the Democratic nomination in 2020. It's only been 4 years. And she's so disillusioned with the Democratic Party. Kennedy is disillusioned with the Democratic Party. Joe Biden has taken his party out of a lane where it can get a majority of voters. And that's probably why they're letting in so many illegals right now. They got to crate voters. But I do think that it would be an interesting ticket. I don't know whether Donald Trump would be comfortable with it. But anyone who hasn't seen Tulsi Gabbard's speech at CPAC 2 years ago, go watch it. You don't have to be a Republican, Democrat, Independent to appreciate what she said. Amazing. Yeah. All right. I can't believe it, Amanda. The hour slipped by us way too quickly. We're going to have some great exclusive coverage tomorrow night from the ground in Nevada, where caucuses will be taking place soon when Donald Trump is going to be that winner. We already know the outcome. We'll have Congressman Eli Crane as well tomorrow. But now it's time to hand things off to Grant Stinchfield. Have a great